This talk is called Take Better Risks, Placing Smarter Technology Bets with a Tech Adoption Rubric. So thank you very much. My name is Ben DiMaggio. I am the VP of Technology at ThinkShout. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a longtime full stack web developer. And I used to co-own a little Drupal shop called Digital Loom that was based out of Cambridge for some years. Then I moved to ThinkShout as a technical architect and eventually came to be the manager of our development team. I sort of backed into technology leadership, as a lot of people do. I think I didn't set out on this career thinking like, oh yeah, I really want to manage a lot of disputes and try to obligate people to do billable hours. That's my dream.
Yeah. Oh, are we recording?
Oh yeah. No. So yeah, the broad thing of what I'm trying to do here is help people who are in a similar situation to me. That is, people who are presently leading a development team of any size, people who are not yet leading a development team, but who see themselves, I'm a developer now, but I'd like to go into management. I'd like to try to make those technical decisions. Or else who just want to stay as a pure developer, but are not happy with the way that they've seen their team come to shared technology decisions that need to be shared by the whole team. So let me talk about the sort of structure of the talk before I dive into it. Basically, I want to lay out the problems that my approach is meant to solve. I'm going to talk about the goals that I think that we can achieve by implementing it, the process of actually implementing this process, so to speak, and the outcomes that I've actually seen happen after we applied this approach to making technical decisions at ThinkShout. So first, as you might have thought from the questions that you saw at the top of this talk, I wanted to see what everybody here might have seen in your own shops. Can anybody here, just at a high level, talk about the last time their development team adopted some new technical approach? And I'm not necessarily talking about it is literally bleeding edge technology, but rather it is new to this team. So a lot of what we're talking about doesn't have to be super advanced. It's just, this isn't what we have done. How do we make that? How do we bridge that gap? Could be like moving to a new front end task runner, or like a different CSS framework that you've used before, or even trying a new CMS. Not necessarily fishing for disaster stories. I'm just curious about when you've seen this done on your own team.
We've been moving some stuff into Cloudflare, trying to get the DNS done. Just there's not a lot of method of that madness. It's just an industry standard.
I see. And that is part of the question and what I'm trying to get at. Like, do you know how that decision got made?
I made that decision and I asked it.
And that's, if that goes smoothly, there's something wrong. Other examples?
Yeah. We have a complex DNS environment and adopted a tool or a service called ED Reader to help us be able to route traffic. So we go through our blocks, our web application environment.
And was there contention around that?
There was, because I led the decision, that there was, what we did, we looked at a bunch of options and then presented it to the stakeholders. There was a lot of pushback from the stakeholders and back and forth. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, but we eventually adopted it.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. I'm curious to see whether what I suggest would have made that easier. Either one.
Yeah, and this isn't specifically developer, it's more stakeholder, how to have an initiative to adopt more open source tooling as, or as just running processes within the business, that sort of thing. And that can be a difficult problem to solve, especially if you have particular requirements, that you're maybe not even clear about.
Right.
So, yeah, I'd be interested to see how this decision making comes back.
I hope
Ironing that out.
I hope that it meets that standard. This is very helpful, and I think it kind of gets us into the mindset that we want to be in to think about solving these problems. So to set the table for how we came to need this process, I want to tell you a story. It's about wine, which is great. Someone you know?
No, we're just excited about wine and map.
Wine and map, topical for us.
Have I been
Yeah,
website
relevant.
from you?
Wow.
So about 3 years ago, ThinkShout won the bid to build a new website for the Oregon Wine Board. They wanted a site that really was a pretty basic brochureware project. It was going to talk about just who they were, who they served, event highlights, blog posts that are supposed to get people excited about wine tourism in Oregon. The only thing about it that was at all dynamic or might even be considered a technical challenge was that they wanted this tool for finding wineries that offer a tasting room. So it is filterable by region of the state, type of wine, and the characteristics of the tasting room. Like, is it dog friendly? Is it family friendly? Can you get to it on a bike? We assigned to the project a new technical lead, who I will call Vic, because it starts with a V, and that will make sense in a minute. Vic was new and very eager to prove himself. And he also brought to the job a level of experience with Vue.js that no one else in our shop had at that point. And he was very keen, as a means of proving himself, to build this feature using Vue.js. And he had these really compelling arguments about it. He was saying, look, it's going to be a better user experience. It's going to give this app-like feeling. There's going to be no more back and forth trips to the server. People click on a thing happens, and the client will be delighted with it. My job as the manager of the department and as the account manager for this project was to think about wider considerations. Like, well, okay, once we do build this thing, let me go back. Building this thing will take an amount of money that I did not account for when I sold this project. Is this going to actually work? I have this person's swearing up and down that it will, but I haven't seen him do it yet, and so it's very possible this will blow up my scope. Then, if we do build this thing, who is going to maintain it? If Vic gets tired of it in 6 months, we're all stuck with this thing that nobody knows how to fix. And the client's not going to be happy about that either. And then there was a third consideration, which was even more contentious, because what we did have in the shop was a fair amount of experience with React, which, if you're familiar with front-end frameworks, is often posed as being in contention with Vue.js. When word got around to the other developers in our shop, and there are about 15 of us, there was discussion. It was conflict, and it wasn't conflict about this particular site. It was conflict about what this choice for this particular site would entail for our entire practice. Oh no, are we going to be a Vue.js shop? What about all this time I've spent on my own trying to learn React, because everybody talks about React as the dominant standard, and what about all of the work that I have put in trying to get them here to do more React work? So there was another dev, a particularly influential senior dev who I'll call Rudolph, just because it starts with an R and so does React. And his focus was, we need to do more React stuff. And in fact, he had a sort of long-term plan for us, just as Vic did. If we do more React stuff, let's take on little React projects, and then soon we'll get to do headless Drupal and React things. Now, I could go into what the economics of a choice like that would be for us and for the kinds of clients that ThinkShout works for. But in short, that would be a fairly significant decision. And for it to be driven by one individual developer's influence and ambition is perhaps not a healthy way to run the organization. So I want to step away from my immediate situation and talk about the problem that I was now facing in this situation. When you start out as a developer, you, I think, get good at being a developer by sharpening certain instincts. There's an old kind of saw about what the virtues of a programmer are. This was from Larry Wall, the guy who invented Perl, and he used to say that it was laziness, hubris, and impatience. I think there's something to that, but it's a little kind of like cute and clever. My experience is different. I think the things that make you succeed in the field are these three. You are able to apply creative problem solving. You focus on the new. You're very flexible. You're able to think about problems laterally and find surprising, efficient ways to solve them. And this is the one that I think really makes a difference. It is grit. It is just sheer willingness to look at a screen full of errors, not give up, and keep going. Those things get you places as a developer. Let's say that you're a freelancer, you've got a new project. The client says in passing, usually, hey, you know what? We really want this site to be like fast and performant. And you think, that's the thing. Now I'm going to apply that interest in the new, that flexibility. I'm going to finally do a Gatsby site for the first time because it's a static site generator. It's going to produce these lightning fast pages, and the client is going to be just overjoyed about it. We all know that clients very seldom are like, that's my favorite front-end framework. Like, that's not a thing. They just care about the result. So let's say you go through with it, you build out that Gatsby site with the Drupal front end, and everything is going great. All the tutorials are turning out to do what you thought they were going to do. You even get to the point where you themed the site and it looks the way it's supposed to. And then you get your client entering content, and they find halfway through that suddenly there's just all these crazy errors happening as they start to enter stuff that has like nested paragraphs in it, which is not uncommon in Drupal to have nested paragraph. It turns out, and this is drawn from life, by the way, because I looked at the Gatsby module's issue queue, that's a big problem for that module. There's some kind of recursion that is going on and that is causing it to be impossible to save complexly nested nodes. So, okay, you're the freelancer, you sold this thing, you are 90% of the way through. You have to spend the time. You have to pull late nights, you have to submit patches in the issue queue, you have to recruit help from the other developers who care about this, and you can get it solved. And you did get it solved, let's say, in this hypothetical. Great. The client's none the wiser, the thing goes out, no problem. Well, what I'm suggesting is, oops, this is you. Working really hard, I forgot to click. What I'm suggesting is this option is only available, you are much more free to choose this as a solo developer, or even as a single developer in a shop. You can, even if you have 14 other colleagues, say, look, I'm going to take responsibility for this thing I'm passionate about. I'm going to make it happen. You have the freedom to pioneer that approach because you have spare resources, namely your time and your energy. Now, when you are in the role of leading a group of people, you no longer have that liberty. You are obligated to think differently about resources because they're not your resources anymore. Yours personally, they are the time and the energy of your team. And in another sense, they are the time and energy that you are being paid to exert on behalf of your clients. And your clients are not very interested in paying for your exploration into Gatsby, per se. So that's this situation. This is, and pick any one of these upset people defending themselves against the client, and you'll recognize what I'm talking about. So you could, I think, call those developers' attitude shiny object syndrome. But I think that that's a little unfair and dismissive to call it shiny object syndrome. I think that it really is an articulation of that quality that makes you a good developer. It is flexibility and lateral problem solving. So if you are in the position of trying to get your whole shop to get on the same page and do something that is reasonably efficient and responsible with client resources or with your organization resources, but not lose that enthusiasm, you have to find a way to merge those two processes. Any worthwhile process will sufficiently harness developer time and focus, but it will also work within your organization's resource limits. So that's what this looks like. To put all of that briefly, you need to merge those perspectives, the early adopting developer and the cost-conscious client. If you succeed in doing that, you'll be able to get the value that's the best possible value from new technology opportunities. You'll be able to keep developers aligned with organizational goals, and you'll be able to stay within your innovation budget, whatever that is. And I think that term innovation budget is one that I found myself returning to over and over again as I thought about this, because there really is just a limit to the number of late nights you can ask people to pull to fix problems, but you do need to be able to adopt new stuff. So I want to take a brief detour for a minute and talk about a book that I really like. It is called The Manager's Path, which is it's by Camille Fournier, and I really cannot recommend it highly. It follows the trajectory of a technologist's career with a chapter devoted to each job, each step in their career path. Individual contributor, mentor to young developers, team lead, a tech lead, team manager, and on up to the CTO of an agency or a large company. And in that book, there's a section called The Do's and Don'ts of Managing Conflict, which is ultimately what I'm talking about here. And I'm going to draw some quotes from it. And I want to give you a minute to just read the first one. It's not too beefy, but I think it's really helpful. So as you're seeking this single unified process, and we're talking about making it public, making a decision-making system public to people, it would be tempting to think what I'm suggesting is a vote or a seeking of consensus. It's not really true. You, as the person leading the department or as the technical leader, you need to be the person who owns that decision exactly because it is your job to have that perspective of the entire organization and perhaps of the clients that you serve. That is not anybody else's job but yours. But if you share with people, if you share with your team the process you will be using to make your technical decisions, you're not trying to set up a vote. You're trying to make clear why you choose what you choose. And you want to guide ahead of time the suggestions that people will make. If they know on what basis a decision gets made, they're going to bring out the ideas that are most likely to succeed. Very relatedly, obviously, it's important to make people understand and emotionally cope with the loss that they may experience when you tell them, I know you love this thing, but we are not going to do it. And here's why. If they know ahead of time why you were going to say that, it's easier. It's not perfect. And we all know that people get attached to their thing, and it's very, very difficult to dislodge sometimes. But if you can continually point back to a process that was in place before they ever made their suggestion, it's a lot easier. Okay, so let's talk about building a rubric. First step. First part of the process, obviously, you have to consider the organization. You may notice that, by the way, although I talk a lot about Think Shout and it being an agency, I'm going to talk about organizations more. That's because Think Shout works for nonprofits, and so a lot of the technical leaders that I know from our client base. And I'm hopeful, too, that there are a lot of nonprofits, around and other types of organizations and just strictly for-profit agencies here at the conference. So let's look carefully at that agency or that organization. Start with obviously what your organization exists to do. If you have a mission, vision, and values document, that's a really helpful start, although I'll say that they are often a little too abstract and kind of aimed at a different audience than your developers, but nonetheless, it's good to have that there, and your rubric should ladder up to those mission, vision, and values statements because it's not pure marketing. if it's well done, a mission, vision, and value statement is really what your organization exists to do. That said, in a more practical sense, it is important to think about kind of more day-to-day, what do you exist to do? So I'll talk about my company. We're an agency. We exist to build websites for nonprofits, like the one you see in the background here. This is the Center for Strategic and International Study. We maintain those websites. We help our clients achieve their aims through digital means. And lastly, we have to sustain ourselves as a B corporation that continues to do this work, right? So those are 4 critical things. And we've got to keep that top of mind when we're making our decision-making process. Similarly, not just goals, but risks. What are the organizational risks that you face? I can talk about us again. And I think anybody from agency land will recognize these. We can underestimate how long a project is going to take when the client is disappointed or we have a change order that they don't want to deal with. We can overestimate how long a project is going to take and we never get the project in the first place because it goes to somebody cheaper. Or a project deploys fine, more or less on target, on budget, on schedule, but it's fragile and it breaks and maintenance is more expensive than everybody was expecting. Those are important risks for us to bear in mind when we think about how to make technical decisions. Last but not least, we have to think about our resource limitations. Different organizations have different ones. For us, our innovation budget is reasonably easy to pin down because we have a certain number of client work billable hours that we need every developer to hit every single week in order to make our expectations. So we can take that number, add to it the number of hours that we expect for internal stuff like our weekly stand-up meetings or managerial one-on-ones or professional development time, and then subtract that from 40, and that's the chunk that we have to spend on internal innovation stuff. And it adds up to about between 2 and 5 hours per developer per week, and we can consolidate those over time. So it's possible for us to take on big projects if we were to be thoughtful about how to use those 2 to 5 hours per person per week. So, second part, you need to consider your team. Our team is not this big, but they're in there if you look. So think about what kind of suggestions your team has brought to you historically. Do they tend to be like really broad things? You need to think about sort of managing suggestions for, hey, we need to build all headless sites, or hey, we need to start using Python-based CMSs or whatever. Or is it more often like, hey, I want to use this module, but it's an alpha, that's going to govern how important the question of scale is in your decision making. And I think it's important not to over-index on any of this stuff that is kind of specific to one noisy voice on your team, because people do come and go. And the objective here isn't to treat people as disposable. Rather, it's to put in place a system that is going to outlast any one person, including you yourself, the leader of the technology team. So also recognize where your staff knows more than you do, which is likely in a lot of places. Certainly it is for me. You need to recognize your own limitations, and you need to think about where you'll be able to offload some of the decision-making process to specific trusted people in specific limited ways. Asking people, for example, look, I don't know about this new technology. I don't even know the language this framework is written in. Can you just take a look at it and tell me, does it pass the smell test for you? That is, I think, perfectly reasonable way to use people smarter than you or more experienced than you who work on. What is, in your experience, the thing that people miss when they make suggestions? What are the kinds of organizational perspectives they fail to take into account when they're like, oh my gosh, yes, we need to use Tailwind for everything, everywhere, or whatever. Not that I have any beef with Tailwind. So yeah, very last, think about how your team is going to handle this change that you're putting. I think it's possible to get a little touchy-feely about this, but is wise to bear in mind that when you implement a change of any kind in your organization, including a new premise, a new policy, there's going to be a loss. People will lose something, and you will do well to manage that loss in a responsible way. So not to tell people to suck it up, this is how it is. That's just not going to work that great. Rather, hear it, understand it, reflect it back to people, and think about some way that you can mitigate. So, for example, one thing that people lose if you put a policy like this in place, look, this is my new policy for making tech decisions. We all have to live under it. One thing they'll lose is freedom to maybe bend your ear and bug you enough that you're going to just submit and be like, fine, leave me alone, I'll do it. They're going to lose a certain amount of freedom or a certain feeling of power. But it's important to say, look, you do still have power. You just need to route it through this rubric for making decisions. It's just one example, but you're going to face your own challenges in this respect when you put it into play. Okay. So, having thought about these two factors, think about the organizational needs, goals, risks, budget, and think about how your staff tends to do this stuff traditionally. You can finally actually put together a rubric. I do think that your mileage is going to vary based on what your organization's like and what answers you provided to those earlier questions, but I'm going to provide you here what we do, and I think you should feel free to copy it. I'm going to make the link available at the end of the call. So everything you're about to see here, and there's 8 points, is in priority order. So scale, first and foremost, as I've kind of implied, that is the biggest deal. And it's, none of this stuff is rocket science, but this is a talk about putting it together in a complex way or in a consistent way. Obviously, if somebody is trying to change everything about a given project, or if a change that someone suggests will touch everything on a given project, that is going to be a big mark against that change. It doesn't mean it's impossible for it to work. It just means that it has to really provide a benefit commensurate with that risk. So scale is the biggest one. And then the obvious second one, and as I say, we're an agency, so clients apply, is the value for the client. Is this new technology going to obviously solve a real problem that they have, or push forward some efficiency that wasn't possible without it? And of course, does it respect their budget and their timeline? Next, we need to think about what does this technology change do for us, the organization? Is it going to solve a problem that we have, or if not, is it going to give us some new opportunity for efficiency now or in future projects? We have to think, of course, about our ability to be productive beyond just the one person who's going to be the proselytizer or the person who's selling it. And we have to think about what maybe it'll do for other projects beyond this. Are we going to, by adopting Vue.js, are we going to get a whole influx of new Vue.js projects? And also, and this ties to the question about the innovation budget, is the innovation budget getting used somewhere else? And how does this sit next to that expenditure? If we are already spending time trying to do React work in another place, does it make sense for us to simultaneously do Vue? Maybe it does, but it's a stretch. Ease of maintenance or ease of learning, both of these are kind of tied in the question of like how well it's documented and what's the complexity of the thing, and are we going to be able to get somebody other than the main evangelist to work on it? As I've said, that was a tricky one for Vue. Team interest. This is critical because, as I was implying earlier on in the talk, one of the things that you have as a solo developer, and one of the big sort of resources to draw on, is your just sheer excitement about technology. So if we can get other people on board, it does make a difference, and it certainly sways me. Does it have an active community? This new technology, Relatedly, is it reasonable to expect it to stay? This one is very difficult to figure out, but it is an important piece of our responsibility to clients for sure. One way that I've been doing it is to look at the Stack Overflow developer surveys that come out every year. They've been coming out since 2011, I think. And you can watch the stock of every different like framework and technology rise and fall over time. You know, at least look for stuff on the upswing, ideally something that's had a pretty long plateau. It's, you know, you could find yourself the owner of an ASP.NET site. It's easy to forget the ones that were hit for a minute. And finally, stability, obviously. So, you know, as I said, I think these are places where you can kind of outsource certain of the criteria to somebody who may know more than you, but you want to be careful not to abdicate the decision-making power. Okay, so we've built our rubric. Now the hard part is sharing it out. So I was talking about change management before. Here's where we really focus on that. The objective is to create real participation with people. So to that end, I think you want to really focus on like getting people on board, sharing power with, not exerting power over people. You know, it happens to be my idea, but I'm excited to get your feedback on it. One sort of tactic for doing that is not to share it out in writing immediately, but rather to share it out at a meeting where you can talk people through it and do that work as you share the rubric, tie it to the higher organizational goal so that people are really clear, look, I'm showing my work. This isn't just, you know, autocracy. This is like the organization trying to tell you what it needs. So yeah, share those goals, risks, and resource limitations. As I said, I guess share the higher level context. I guess I was pretty clear about that. You walk through the points of the rubric. And importantly, once you have had that meeting, you want to open the door for feedback right away. And you are almost certain to get crickets because it's just such a big kind of abstract thing to put in front of people. Just put it in every place that your team normally hangs out and make very clear. Talk to me about it privately, or let's have discussions about it on our Slack channel or whatever. But the important thing is to like get real understanding of this thing. So for our example, we had it in the dev team Slack channel for about 2 weeks before I said, okay, great, this is final. This is how we do it. This is how we make tech decisions. Next, you need to keep it top of mind. So just releasing a policy, if you ever tried doing this with any group of people of any size, you will know. It's shocking how little people really care about your Google Doc. They'll look at it, they'll say great, or they'll say it's terrible. And then if you don't keep hammering on about it, it's going to go away. So whenever a meaningful suggestion about technology comes up, make a point in going back to the rubric. Oh, cool. Let me think about it in terms of the things we all agree we care about, right? We said scope is important and client value and value for us. Also, try to, I wanted to note, and this is what I was trying to get at here, if you're consistent about using it, you will find that actually the thing evolves. And one of the marks of, I think, a functioning policy in any organization is that it is a living document. So as you apply new technology suggestions to it, you will find that it changes, or you need to make changes to it in order to account for the difficulties that individual cases bring up. So my last and sort of most fervent suggestion to you is keep yourself honest by applying this thing, even in situations where people aren't looking. One example for me is like, I have to do a lot of technical sales with ThinkShout. And so every time we are about to pitch a new project that is a little off the beaten path for us technologically, I ask myself like, okay, by doing this job, is it going to be of a scale of change that would like mess with my organization? Can we do it in a way that is going to actually benefit this client? If we do it, is it going to make our organization stronger in some ways, and so on and so forth. So to go back to our original case and talk about some actual outcomes, I wanted to be clear that like I told that story because that was how we came to the idea that we needed some sort of dispassionate rubric for making tech decisions that kept us out of the individual situation where it came up. But in the situation that prompted it, I needed to invent it and then use it right away. So what we wound up doing was not really rocket science either. We went with progressive decoupling. So I realized, do you know what? The problem that we were having when we talked about Vue in this very Vue versus React, what's the whole shop going to do kind of way, was that we were catastrophizing. We were keeping the scope too big of the change. If instead we focused on just include little components that are very appropriate to the thing they're trying to do, rather than trying to say, oh, we're going to do a whole headless site with Nuxt, or we're going to do a whole headless site with Gatsby or with Next.js or whatever. That was going to be too catastrophic a change with too many rests for unclear rewards. So we have done a lot of thinking along those lines. Lullabot wrote some great stuff about, headless is overkill for a lot of sites. Consider progressive decoupling as a way of getting the benefits of front-end frameworks without the drawbacks. And that's what we've committed to doing. So we're mainly using monolithic architectures, whether it's Drupal or WordPress, and then occasionally putting in little components that are appropriate to the need. So you would think that Vic's Vue.js tasting room thing was going to happen, right? Seems like it would have. But we worked through the rest of the factors in the rubric, not just scale, but value for client. And when we thought about how this was going to work for the client and the level of focus they were putting on, oh, it's a wine app, we realized, the problem was still, we're not sure who's going to maintain this thing right now. We're not sure that the client is going to even notice that this change has been made. So we'd be undertaking risk in those areas without reward. So not so much. We decided to keep it traditional. The project went great. Vic understood once I walked him through it, and the client had a great site out of it. But we did still manage to capture the momentum that he created, and we were able to create this Student at Smarter site, which is like a React thing on top of WordPress. We created Blue HQ. I'm sorry, I put these in like you're going to know, but it meant a big deal to us. That's a Drupal site that uses Vue.js to give colorectal cancer sufferers a way to log their treatments. And then we did the ACLU thing where we're now building a WordPress theme for them that implements a lot of Vue.js individual pieces, components. So I just want to say this approach has really helped us find a balance among early adopters and the useful technical advances that they have, but also think about cost-sensitive clients and keep our own organization functional and moving forward technologically. I hope I see more teams using it, and I hope it really works for you. And if it does, please be in touch. I'd love to hear about it. Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Just a comment. I love that so much.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
so glad to hear
That's
it.
very helpful.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Of course. All right.